Wit. I'm a group PM at Niantic, focused on our creator tools. Very excited to be here with you today. And I'll let Martine introduce.
Awesome. Hello, everybody. Still playing around with my camera. I'm in a new office location, so still getting used to it. But hi, everybody. My name is Martin Gonzalez. I run and manage the community on the Scaniverse side. I've been in Niantic for a little bit over 3 years. But yeah, super excited to share some tips and tricks for scanning and splatting.
Okay, awesome. I'm just going to get started here into the first part of our program. So we're going into Niantic Studio, and we're going to go into VPS in Niantic Studio as well. Pablo, you can see my screen, right?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. All right, we're going to go into Studio 101. So just some basics of using Niantic Studio, what it's for. We'll go into VPS and Studio, where I'll actually just share the new feature, share my screen. We'll kind of play around with the new feature. And then I'm going to go over some resources for building with VPS. All right. So as a background, our team's mission at Niantic on the studio team is to empower creators like you to build the next generation of immersive content right in the browser. So we've been working with this community for years, and we've been hearing a lot of feedback around Eighth Wall, and especially around how developing AR experiences is not easy. Especially when it comes to designing an AR scene or a 3D scene, being able to test and preview that scene, and then also creating gameplay interactions on top of your AR content. And so that's where Studio comes in. In June, we launched Niantic Studio. We also launched our free tier. This is our flagship creator program. So it's a visual editing platform. It's for creating immersive 3D and XR content. It's completely web-based. And yeah, it's free to use, no credit card required. I'm going to go through Niantic Studio basics pretty fast, but just as a bit of context for Niantic Studio, our approach was to take the Eighth Wall web-based universal deployment platform and then combine that with an intuitive visual editor and then also a new gaming engine. So going through just a couple of the key features for Studio, we have our visual editor interface. I know a lot of you have already seen this, but with Studio, for those that haven't seen it, you can build in 3D. So you can do things like drag and drop it in your assets. You can visually configure different scene elements and components. You can manage all your project files, position, camera, lighting, etc., work on animations. And then you get instant feedback within the editor. So this is going to feel familiar with other 3D editors like Unity, Unreal, Lens Studio, Spline, and Bezier too. Also, if you prefer to work in code, you totally can do that. So similar to the Eighth Wall Cloud Editor, you get a full code editor where you can build in custom scripts or you can add in your own libraries. And then you can also see your code changes reflected immediately in the 3D space. Another key feature for Studio is live sync. So this is live simultaneous editing and playback. This is a pretty unique feature that lets you build and play at the same time. So you can rapidly iterate and you can see your changes as you go. And this is going to be especially helpful for game interaction creation. So you can kind of test and play at the same time. Another key feature is around our AR simulator. So we have totally overhauled the AR development experience for the Eighth Wall Cloud Editor. You now have the ability to kind of build and test using our live simulator. And we have a set of different virtual environments for you to see how your content would actually behave in the real world. And I should note too that the simulator here is actually running the Eighth Wall engine. So you're running the engine directly through this kind of remote simulator screen. And so you're actually able to see like a full end-to-end test of how your content is going to behave. And this is going to be especially helpful for VPS. All right. We're going to talk about this in Martine's part of the presentation, how to use splats in Studio. And then we also have more programming coming up next week. But I also want to mention that we launched Splat asset support in Studio last month. And so, yeah, what is a Gaussian splat? Well, unlike a mesh that is a bunch of polygons and a texture, Gaussian splats are composed of millions of tiny independent splats or blobs. And then they create a vibrant kind of 360 picture in an immersive model. So you get extreme detail and it looks very realistic. With Scaniverse, you can capture a splat and then you can export that asset and bring it into Studio. So this is going to create a nice foundation for a very hyper realistic 3D experience. Okay, and we have a ton of resources in general for building with Studio, building game mechanics. So definitely recommend that you check out our project library. Lots of different examples for what you can do and how you can build. And we're continuing to add new projects all the time here. So you're going to see this project library grow and expand. All right, so that's kind of the background on Studio. And just, yeah, in a nutshell, we have a ton of features for editing 3D models, editing in 3D, gaming mechanics, custom scripts, and building with our gaming framework. We have features for building XR, specifically face effects and world effects, and now VPS. And then this is all running on the 8th Wall web platform. So that's going to allow you to easily build, deploy, test, preview. So it's kind of one-stop shop for being able to quickly iterate and build a 3D XR experience. All right, so now we're going to get to the fun part. A very new feature is VPS in Studio. So what is VPS? VPS is an AR technology that lets you localize and anchor digital content in the physical world with centimeter level precision, and it ensures that your digital elements align perfectly with real world locations. So we're going to keep digital content stable and accurately placed. And so let me play this video here. Just kind of give you a background. All right, so we have launched VPS in Studio, and now I actually wanted to show you the feature in Studio Live. So I'm going to flip over to my studio and a project that I have created. Let me close this out here. So I have a blank project here, and you'll notice that we have a new map icon at the top of the viewport. This is our geospatial browser. So our geospatial browser allows you to view all the locations where we have VPS activation or VPS enablement. So there are over 700,000 locations around the world where you can create a VPS enabled experience. So our geospatial browser is integrated right within the Studio editor. And then you can go in and you can set up different filters. So let's say I want to see, only buildings, or I want a VPS like high quality location. So we have kind of different localization quality filters that you can set. So I might set, I want good and fair. And then I can go in and I can preview a location. So kind of flip around here, I can kind of orbit around the scene. I can check out other locations. I can also submit a location too if there's not a particular location that I'm seeing that I want to actually work with. So here I have, again, this kind of like diamond and toad park. So I'm going to add that into my scene. So I'll go ahead and just add this location, close out the geospatial browser. All right. And so now we've got kind of this park scene here. I've brought it into my viewport, and then you can see more of the location details here. And in, Studio kind of just brings in this visual of the mesh so that you can add your content and build against this. But if you want to actually download the mesh texture, you can do that. Let's say you want to add a particular effect into the scene. When you are aligning content, you can create a child object of the location, and that's going to localize that content around the origin of this particular place here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add just a box shape. I'm going to make it a child object. So then I'm going to position it over into the scene. So you're here watching me live showcase this feature. I might change the color here. All right, so now we've got a red box and it's at my park. All right, I'm going to go ahead and build. And then you're going to want to make sure that your camera is set to VPS enabled. So that's just kind of a trick here. Make sure that you have enabled VPS on the camera. That's going to allow you to actually localize with the end user camera. And then with the simulator, you can test this. So in the simulator, I can go and I can find the location that I have added. So here we're going to bring in the diamond and the toad park. And then you're going to want to hit location found. So we're kind of manually firing an event here. Let's like move about the scene. Okay, let's see this. Ooh. Let me refresh this. Okay. Okay, I'm getting, let me go one more time here. And not sure why my content is not showing here. So a little technical difficulty. We are in beta, but let me play around with that and then we'll come back to it. So yeah, if you have an object that you add as a child, it should show up here, and you'll want to make sure that you hit these kind of location events so that we can make sure that we have a VPS kind of simulated event so that you can test your content.
Yeah,
But this is just a little bit of a preview on VPS in Studio. The key features here are going to be the geospatial browser, being able to position content, and then also using the location in the simulator.
looks like you're getting some live troubleshooting in the chat as well. I think your cube is not fully in the scene.
Oh, it might be too. Yeah. Okay. But then, yeah, we should see it out here.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
So let's see. I'm going to play around with it. I also have been kind of adding this location, taking it out, so there could be an issue. It's just got the constant removals of this particular location. Okay. All right. Just going back into our deck here, I also want to point you to a few resources for using VPS in Studio. So you'll want to make sure that you check out our projects. We have sample projects for using splats. We have sample projects for VPS. So we have a great procedural VPS experience where you can kind of use multiple locations in your project and position content once the user has localized. And then you'll also want to check out our docs. We have a whole section on using VPS on eighthwall.com/docs. So these are going to be good resources for you as you start to build out your projects during this challenge. All right, that's the overview on Studio and using VPS. I'm going to pass it over to Martine, who's going to take us through Scaniverse.
Awesome. Thanks, Amanda. And I apologize in advance. Mine won't be as exciting as Amanda's. And I'm sure many of you already know a lot of these tips and tricks. But definitely wanted to make sure that for any new folks or any folks who are having difficulty producing some high quality scans or splats, that we're sharing best practices and learnings as we go along. I've been splatting for a couple months now, so still learning myself. But definitely wanted to highlight some of the things that we find incredibly useful as we learn about our technology and our ability to produce some high quality splats and scans. So a little bit about what we'll be covering today is the history of Scaniverse, kind of why it's important, where it came from, where it's going, splatting 101, and then also leaving you all with the know-how and awareness of our Scaniverse community, where you can go and request support, connect with other developers, or just people using Scaniverse for a variety of reasons. There's been some pretty awesome scans and splats shared in our community forum of people using it to explore caves or map out their trails, so on and so forth. My most recent fun one, I built a little tour of Monterey, California, and just highlighted different areas that folks can go check out on this iconic 17-mile drive. But yeah, anyways, let's go ahead and jump right on into history. Pablo, you can hand us to the next slide. We'll kind of see where Scaniverse really started and a lot of what we do here in Niantic. So for many of you, I know you all are super young, and so Keyhole might predate you, but Keyhole was the very first product that eventually became Google Earth and gave us the ability to navigate and see locations all around the map using satellite views and locations that other people would contribute. And that really developed then into Wayfair, which we now use for all of our products. If you play any of our games, Pokemon Go, Monster Hunter Now, Pikmin Bloom, Ingress, so on and so forth, you see these locations coming to life in your games. However, it's still very much in a two-dimensional flat plane. So Scaniverse really brings the ability to create three-dimensional spaces and engagement opportunities for our users and for you all as well. And so we're super excited to continue adding an additional layer to our map that brings it more into the realistic three-dimensional life that we all navigate on a day-to-day basis. Next slide, please. So in order to produce some of these really high quality scans and splats that you're going to be able to use in your products is making sure that you prepare yourself for success. As you can see in this splat that I created, one of the entrance sites to Monterey, California, it's very sunny. So I made sure to check the weather, make sure that when I'm going out to scan these locations, it's really conducive to producing a really good end result. And with that, similar to scanning in LiDAR, the more light you have, that's, at least for me, organic, from a really good light source, well distributed across the entire thing that you're scanning, you're going to be able to produce a much higher quality scans. If you're intending to, scan the whole thing, I know folks play around with lighting to get some really awesome effects. And so if that's what you're going for, then ignore the lighting feedback. But if not, making sure that you are in a well-lit location, making sure that you have a LiDAR-enabled device, making sure that you have a portable charger. Many of you who play our other products know it drains your battery. That's just the reality of it. And so I have 2 or 3 portable chargers that are always with me in my backpack as I'm going out and scanning these locations. And then lastly, planning your route that you're going to be scanning, making sure that the area that you're walking around is safe. As you can see, this location is not too far from a very busy street. There's bushes and rock formations in the landscaping. And so had I not planned exactly how I was going to scan this entire sign, I could have easily put myself into danger or tripped over a rock or walked into a bush and destroyed, this public beautiful landscape. So making sure that you are planning ahead of time to set yourself up for success and make sure that everything runs smoothly, you're not hurting yourself or others, or accidentally destroying property in some of these public locations. Next slide, please. So getting into the actual beginning of your scan, or as you're splatting and scanning the location, you want to make sure that you're walking at a slow, natural pace. This is not a race. You're not trying to get the most in the least amount of time. You want to give your device enough time and the lighting and the angles and the texture to be captured. And so for that, you want to walk at a very slow, natural pace, right? So maybe a step every half second, you're moving slowly, making sure that you're capturing it from multiple angles to really capture a lot of that detail, but also allowing that light to reflect and be captured by your device. The location that you're trying to scan should always be the focal point. There are some tips and tricks if you're trying to scan larger locations where this is very helpful, but also if you're trying to scan the Gandhi statue, for example, that you see here on the screen, at all points, it's very much the central focal point within the screen. And that's going to make sure that your device is capturing the detail and information that you want it to capture. It's not accidentally capturing, the Bay Bridge in the background. You can barely see it. And that's what's intended. That's what's supposed to happen. You want to make sure that at all times that remains the focal point. There are different locations that have a very funky angle. We'll talk about those in a few slides. So if you're scanning a mural, if you're scanning something that has, so it's on the face of a large building, but sits on multiple sides or facets of that building, you're going to want to use different scanning techniques. But for the main point, and for a lot of the things that you're going to be scanning, you definitely want to keep them center so that as you're scanning, it's capturing the right information of what you want to capture. Varying your distance and angles of your device, especially when there's texture, when there's layers to what you're scanning. In here, you can see that Gandhi is wearing a cape or some type of shawl or piece of fabric clothing that you may want to get under to capture all of that detail. And so by walking around it, anywhere between a 10 meter to a 35 meter, depending on the size, you're going to want to go in and out, and we'll talk about some of those techniques for splatting and scanning in a few slides as well. But the angles, I think, is incredibly important to really capture, that sleeve or that piece of fabric sticking out in a certain direction or in a certain way that wouldn't be captured otherwise had you just been scanning it from a 45 degree or a 90 degree angle from the ground. So you want to increase it to a 35 degree, 45 degree, play around with it. Thankfully, if you're scanning on a mobile device, they're pretty flexible depending on your wrist mobility, but you should be able to capture a lot of that detail with the best lighting. Next, make sure that every minute you're recording something different. And we recently discovered something also interesting is that you want to end your scan very close to where you started your scan. And so we helped, we don't know fully the reasons just yet, but we're looking into it. But when I've scanned locations where I can go and make a full circle of a larger item, when I close it up based off of where I started, it does produce at least a visually better rendering of it for me, especially after I've enhanced it a couple of times. If you are using the enhance feature, just know there's a maximum of 5 times that you can enhance it. And you might not notice a big difference from the first enhance to the second one, but I was able to see a significant difference from not processing it to doing it the 5th time. But yeah, when you're recording, making sure that you're moving along and you're not standing still for too long, unless you're really trying to capture that really fine detail in some of the locations that you're trying to scan. That's really the only time that I see very useful for pausing for a moment to capture that really great detail in some of those objects. And then lastly, the one that I find probably will make you look a little funky while you're splatting or scanning out in public is this concept of moving like a crab side to side. So you always want to make sure that your phone is facing the object that you're trying to scan at all times. So you're not scanning, side to side, moving your body from side to side where your phone does most of the movement. You want your body to be shifting. So your phone is constantly here, scanning whatever's in front of you, and then you're moving side to side. So your phone stays pretty parallel to your shoulders versus, shifting it to an angle. So now it's at a 35-degree angle from my shoulder and not really in front of me. That will really help with capturing a lot more detail, really enhancing some of the textures, folds, and angles in what you were scanning. And so those are definitely some of the top splatting techniques. A couple other ones, just again to highlight lighting conditions. We did a couple scans and splats at nighttime of backlit signs, which produces a really interesting effect. So if you want to play around with it and see how cool you can produce, definitely go for it. But if you're really looking to capture a lot of that detail during the daytime, make sure it's a nice sunny day, and even a little overcast can be helpful because the clouds will kind of reflect a lot of that light and disperse it amongst whatever you're scanning. Enhancing your splat. Again, there's a 5-time enhance limit that we have on those. And then ending where you've begun to make sure that you're getting the full effect and full splat of what you are scanning. Has been really helpful. One that I don't use it often, but some of my colleagues do, is pausing. So as you're scanning an object, there is a pause button that will appear just right of the record button. I haven't found it super useful and I don't use it as often, but it is there. I noticed my colleagues use that. Let's say if it's a very busy location, there's gonna be people walking around. If you see a group approaching, you don't want to capture them or want them to interrupt your scan, just go ahead and pause it, stay still, wait for them to pass by, and then start your scan all over, or not all over, but where you had left it off versus starting it all over. So that is a possibility that you can use as well. Next slide. We'll go ahead and talk about the different types of techniques and patterns that you can use to scan different locations. These are some that I use constantly for objects that are pretty focal center, very flat, or just don't have a lot of dimension and texture to them. The circular movement ranging from a 10 meter to 35 feet has been really helpful in producing some really great scans and splats with a lot of detail. This is also very helpful when it's a super lit day. There's no clouds in the sky. There's no, shiny surfaces that are going to reflect some harsh light back at my phone. But this has been really helpful. Another one that I like to do in one of the splats that you saw earlier of the 2 whales jumping out, I used the flower movement one just to make sure that I captured the height of the whale statue because it was really tall. And so by moving inwards and outwards, you're helping it capture the realness of its height. But by moving in, you're able to capture a lot of the detail as well. In it, if you have the opportunity to go back, you can see it, a certain part has been eroded off and you see the texture of what the whale was made out of, and it's this styrofoam, but it captured that detail, which I was really surprised that it actually came out in the rendering. And then for murals, of course, right, you're not just walking back and forth, you want the different angles. And so with the circular movement on the flat surface, whether that's a wall, that really helps with capturing murals, at least in my experience. But you have this library of different patterns that you're able to use while you are scanning whatever you want to render towards the end, whether you're producing a splat or a scan. These have been super helpful in capturing the detail that we want, the angles, the light, the quality, and making sure that there's no see-through spaces within the splats or the scan that you are trying to produce. Next slide, please. Awesome, and this is just some more tips on different types of surfaces. As I mentioned, the one with the corner, doing the circular movement is really helpful to make sure that you're capturing all of the face of whatever it is that you're scanning. And for this, I've seen it mostly with like statues etched into the corners of buildings with a lot of historical ones. This is very present, so if you're able to capture a lot of that detail, things that are also backed up against, there was a splat that I was producing, but right behind it were a bunch of like thorny rose bushes, and I was like, well, I'm not going into there. So then I kind of just treated it like a triangular edge, which really helped produce some of that scan. And then small objects, the circular one works well, and again with flat objects. So with all of these, again, really find what works for you. This is just what's worked for us, and kind of produces the best quality splats and scans that we want. And so, yeah, not much more to share on these, just being aware of the different angles. But next we'll talk about some of the things to avoid. And so very early on, at least for me, my camera holder or my phone holder, my finger extends into the camera. So just making sure that you're not capturing people's faces, especially if they're super identifiable, but also your fingers, can easily slip into a scan or a splat and then produce something that you might not be completely happy with. Checking your surroundings, as I mentioned in the very first splat, there was a really busy street that I wanted to be aware of and make sure that I didn't aimlessly wander into the street as I'm trying to capture the scan. Walking 10 feet, 10 meters to 35 feet within range of that location to make sure you're capturing it. This is super helpful, especially if it's a larger thing that you're trying to scan. Yeah, just some other pointers on here that you want to keep in mind, especially with the weather. Again, always be safe. Make sure you're not scanning out with your devices and battery packs in the middle of the rain. And then making sure that you are uploading any scan that may look incomplete. As many of you know, the very first, as you're scanning, isn't going to look super pretty, but trust the process and make sure that you are processing those and then seeing the end result. And then lastly, just sharing with you all, we have a community. So if we go to the next slide, we have community.scaniverse.com, where you're able to go get support, get user feedback, engage with other people around the world who are using Scaniverse. We have Scaniverse support available Sunday through Friday. Sorry, Saturday is a little outdated at this time, but Sunday through Saturday from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. You're able to, again, connect with other users, share your successes. Folks will share their tips and tricks. You'll see some of those caves that I was talking about earlier that were really cool. And also participate in community events. I see a familiar name in here, so I'm wondering if you're one of our winners from our most recent sweepstakes. But able to participate in some of those. We have some events, highlights, and product updates as well. So yeah, that is all of my spiel. Try to cut it short so that we have time for Q&A and anything else Pablo had planned.
Awesome. Thank you, Martine. And also thank you, Amanda, for answering some of those questions that are coming in via the Zoom Q&A already. There's a lot of questions. So just a heads up, for those of you that are watching the replay, we are answering some of these questions via text, but I will put these questions either in the caption and the description of the YouTube video or in the comments, just so that everyone has access to the questions that were asked and answered. But otherwise, we're going to go ahead and now jump into our developer challenge information. While Amanda continues to answer some of those questions that she can, but it seems like, yeah, they just keep piling on. So thank you all so much for asking all those questions. We will do our best to answer them within the duration of this call. Alrighty, so very quickly, let's go through our newly launched Niantic Studio Real World Gaming Developer Challenge. The goal for this challenge is to create games around either a VPS location or using a Gaussian Splat created with Scaniverse. The challenge will run from October 24th, which started officially last Thursday with the launch of VPS, until December 9th, which, as I mentioned earlier, this is our shortest deadline as far as our challenges for this year. But as you can imagine, we do have the holidays. We have a Thanksgiving holiday week in between that. We also have Election Day next week. So there's a lot of different dates that kind of make this final challenge a little shorter, but I'm confident that you all will make some amazing game experiences. And to incentivize that, we have a lot of great prizes. So first up, we have 2 real-world Splat game grand prizes, each valued at $2,000 cash prize. So there's more grand prizes for this challenge than we've ever done before, because we also have 2 real-world VPS game grand prizes, also valued at $2,000 each. Along with that, you will also be featured in a blog. You have the opportunity to meet with our Niantic staff, to ask questions, provide feedback, and just hear all about where we're going with Niantic Studio, as well as being featured on the 8th Wall homepage. Some of you may already be seeing, if you go to 8thwall.com and scroll through the homepage, you'll see some of the winners from the Create and Play Challenge, which just wrapped up last month there. Beyond the grand prizes, we have 3 additional prizes, 2 of each these prizes. So first off, we have a lifestyle and culture game. So this prize will be for those who creatively integrate, oops, sorry, that's outdated. That's the last challenge. But the lifestyle and culture game will be for those who use and bring in art, music, different cultures from where you're located into VPS or Splat. Next, you'll have the spatial learning game. This is those of you that create any sort of learning experiences, whether that be for a specific tool or tech. That is for that prize will be awarded for. And then lastly, health and wellness game. Last time we did a VPS challenge, we had some really unique games. Libardo had like a running experience where you had to run from one location to the other. So those of you that encourage health and wellness and physical activity using Splats or VPS will also receive that prize. So there's 2 prizes for each of these, both all valued at $1,000. And then lastly, there are 4 additional honorable mention prizes of $250 each. Apologies that these descriptions are outdated. That is my bad. I uploaded the wrong file here, but we'll update that soon on the submission site. Lastly, our judging criteria. So those of you that have participated in these challenges are probably very familiar with how our judging criteria works by now. The first criteria is how well does the experience use a VPS activated location or Splat in their game? Meaning, do you all think about the location as a primary function of the game, or is it just like a secondary option of the game? Meaning, can the game run without that location or that Splat? So just keep that in mind. We will be looking at that very closely for this challenge in particular. Next is gameplay innovation. Does your submission use new innovative gameplay mechanics, or does it uniquely use existing gameplay mechanics? This criteria was specifically added because in our last challenge, we had a lot of games that were kind of like recreations of previously existing games, and I want to challenge you all to try and think of new gameplay ideas for this challenge. So there's something to think about there. Next is our Niantic mission. Does it encourage users to explore the world together? I know some of you might be thinking, wait, does this mean that multiplayer is available? Not necessarily, but there are definitely unique ways to think about how to get folks to get out and explore together, given the tools that are available with VPS and Splats. And then lastly, overall completeness. How complete is your project? Is it a demo? Is it a prototype? Or is it more of a full-fledged game? that's something also to think about. Lastly, a couple of resources for you all. Niantic Studio documentation is available at eighthwall.com/docs/studio. The forum is the best place for any technical support. That is where our developer support engineers live and breathe. They answer questions there very quickly. And then lastly, our developer Slack is available for challenge-related questions. We actually have a specific challenge channel in Slack that you all can get some of those questions answered. And I also will be posting deadline reminders, event reminders in the Slack. So if you haven't already, now is a great chance to join the challenge. You can do that by either going to eighth.io/challenges or scan this QR code. You'll have to create an itch account which is where we host the challenges and sign up. But then after that, you're all good to go and you'll be receiving some reminder emails from that front as well. For the upcoming events that we have going on, you can also RSVP for that at the link that I'm dropping in the chat now. So if you're interested in learning and doing a walkthrough of building with VPS with Jamaica, you can go ahead and RSVP for that workshop. And then lastly, the UX Unleashed event is going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have a lot of great information shared on that one. And then the challenge link is also there as well. So now let's jump into the Q&A. So just as a reminder, some of your questions have been answered. I did see some repeat questions as well. So keep an eye on the Q&A and specifically look at the answered section. But I'm going to go ahead and dive in now, read some of your questions. I'm going to look for VPS and Splat related questions first, and then we'll go into some of the other ones as we have time. So a common question that I saw is one question from here. Daniel asked is, can you cut or crop Gaussian splat, like define a back, front, left, right, top, bottom crop? And I think Amanda, you'd probably be best to answer that.
Sure. Yeah. Within Scaniverse, you can crop a splat, like you mentioned. So there's a couple different tools for cropping, but that is necessary to be done within the Scaniverse app and then bringing it over into Studio. Studio doesn't have a crop function for splat files currently.
Thank you. Alrighty. Yeah, next question is from Paul Wolf. Are there performance best practices for splats? What are the metrics here and splat count?
Yeah, I can take this one. I think, you'll have to take a look at the splat file size, right? So I think that's kind of a key metric to take a look at when bringing that into a studio project. I think you want to make sure, that if you're using that splat file along with a bunch of other assets, you'll want to kind of make sure that you've cropped it to the right degree that can help with performance. I think also be careful when kind of using multiple splats together in a project. While that's possible, it's also can really affect performance. So I'd say like doing all the cropping and then making sure that you're using that spot not along with like a ton of assets in the project. So those are kind of some simple ways that you can get better performance out of splats within Studio.
Gotcha. Next question is from Kyle. I experienced stability issues with the cloud editor and previous scanning utility, being Wayfair. The experiences would shift based on the viewer's position, creating inconsistencies. Are scenes more accurate and stable in Studio?
Yeah, I'll take this one. Along with the VPS enablement within Studio, we have launched a lot of localization and tracking improvements. That goes across Studio and the cloud editor tools. So there are a ton of improvements you should see, better tracking, better stability, faster localization within VPS.
Awesome. Cool. That's exciting. I'm sure a lot of you are excited to try that out. Let's see. Let's look for one that's Scaniverse specific. Oh, here's a good one. any map features in Studio like ARDK to guide users to VPS locations? So that's back to you, Amanda.
Yeah, so we don't have our kind of mapping module that you may have seen in the cloud editor. So I think, yeah, there are more mapping guidance features that are coming within Studio, but we don't have a kind of integrated mapping or guidance, say, module within Studio. But we're working on that.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you.
I think we can also share some sample code too. So we were talking about that earlier with Pablo. We can share some kind of guidance and navigation code, and we will make sure that we get that to this group.
Yep, and I think, Martin, you were already typing an answer to this, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it out loud. Will Scaniverse handle entire buildings, or perhaps just in front of a store or building? Some monuments are very high and I cannot see the top.
Yeah, this is a really great question. I've tried this and failed. Scanning large buildings is very challenging for scanners at the moment. We don't have like a what are they called? Just lost the word, brain fart. It is very challenging, right? So one, your scans shouldn't be any longer than 3 minutes each. And so that's going to create some challenges when you're trying to scan a larger building. That's going to require maybe a 5-minute scan. Height is also an issue. We've seen some folks in our community forum getting creative and using selfie sticks to get higher scan elevation, which has helped. But as far as an entire, I'm thinking of like an Amazon warehouse, that's going to be very challenging and probably not the best thing to try to scan with Scaniverse. You're going to get some challenges, especially when it comes to processing, what's being captured, especially with the height. It's going to be significantly longer than 3 minutes. So your scan is just going to probably start to decrease in quality. But I won't say don't try it. I would say try it and then let us know. I haven't fully successfully done it just yet. I've stuck to mostly, 6 foot high, 7 foot high statues and other locations. It will scan pretty well the face of these locations. So for one of our challenges, it was spooky scenes. Someone scanned, reduced a splat of Halloween decorated face of a building for a business, and that turned out really well. But yeah, when it comes to the roof, the ceiling, or really large objects, it will be a challenge.
Awesome. Thank you, Martin. We have a next question. This is related to the challenge. So for the judging criteria, is a more smaller but more complete game valued higher than a prototype of a more ambitious game? That's a really great question. And I can tell you from experience, it does make the judges' life very difficult because they do weigh both of those things as far as the game goes. If it's a very ambitious game, they will weigh whether or not it's just a prototype, but very high quality as part of it. So to answer your question, no, that's not how it works. They kind of really think about how ambitious the game is to where it was as far as level of completion for the criteria. So yeah, great question. Glad you all are thinking about that because the judges are very fair and take a lot of thinking as far as what the scores you all get. Next question we have related to Studio. So Studio is slow in Windows. Is that compulsory to use Mac? So essentially, should they use Apple products for Studio?
Don't have to use Apple products. I would be happy to follow up on the particular issue you're seeing with Windows. But no, not necessary for developing only a Mac.
Cool. Yeah, Divakar, if you can send me a message on Slack or a screen recording of the issue, I can forward it along and see if we can find a solution or post it in forum directly. Cool. All right, thank you all. Regarding if you need to have a paid 8th wall subscription to participate in this challenge, you do not. Niantic Studio is free to use, as Amanda mentioned earlier, and the challenge is Niantic Studio only. So do not build a cloud editor experience and submit it for the challenge. This is Niantic Studio only. Does our submission need to be in itch? Can it be nested within an existing iOS, Android app? So yeah, that's a really great question regarding submitting to the itch submission site. What you're submitting for the challenge is your 8th wall featured project link. On itch, all you need to do is put in your 8th wall project link in the submission details with some photos, some videos, and that's it. You don't need to actively have all of the code there. On our end, we are mostly just looking for the featured project link and then watching the video. For VPS specifically, we rely heavily on the video for the content, especially if it's location specific, but we will be doing some testing of the experiences. Daniel Roja, yeah, great question. Can you add gravity for floating 3D assets? I think this one's for you, Amanda.
Yes, you can. Check out our physics system using the physics component when adding an object, and you'll have factors for gravity, among other things.
Alrighty, y'all. I'm going to pick
I'll take the first question too around the version control. So there's a question by David. Does Studio have internal version control or can I use Git? Studio does have integrated version control. So you can do things like abandon changes, you can create a staging or development build, you can share that. And then you can go back to previous versions. So take a look at the launch toolbar in the Studio project.
Thank you. Kyle has a great question. If we've scanned several VPS locations with previous Wayfair in the cloud editor, do we need to rescan with Scannerverse and place it in the same location?
Let's see this one. Can you repeat the question, Pablo?
Yeah, if we have scanned several VPS locations in Cloud Editor, do we need to rescan with Scannerverse and place it in the same VPS location? So essentially, do they need to add new scans with Scannerverse to an existing activated location?
No, if it's already activated, you do not need to add scans if you're trying to create a kind of a splat experience, but one that's also VPS enabled, you would need to go and scan that particular location, so you can have kind of the splat asset. Currently, the geospatial browser only gives you access to mesh assets, so you don't have like a splat asset for a particular location.
Awesome, thank you. And then we have a beginner-related question that was answered from Divakar, but might be great for everyone that's watching the replay to see as well. This is from Alicia. Hi, new to all things Niantic. When sharing an AR experience, is an app required? Also, what are more recommended best practices for sharing mobile experiences versus web AR?
Best practices for just using Studio?
Just in general for like sharing experiences out.
Yeah, I mean, Studio lets you quickly publish and share a link. So it lets you create a QR code. I'd say, take advantage of that feature. Generating a link and being able to publish, within seconds can be pretty powerful. You also have the ability to publish to your public profile within 8th Wall. So that's kind of your particular, user URL. And so all your projects can appear there. So I would say, yeah, take a look at our publishing documentation.
Thank you.
Ready. We are at time, everyone.